Perek Hey is the Shir of Tuesday. She must have been Tamuz. Perek Hey. Now, so we understand that the Yiddish Neshama is compared to Hashem in general, to Havaya in general because of Vayipach, and in particular because of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Continues the Rebbe and he says, V'hinei, Hamshachas v'yiridas hanefesh alukis le'elam hazeh. So we have now a Neshama, which in general is blown from Shem Havaya, and in particular mirrors Shem Havaya. And it comes into this world. This godliness, this Yud Kei Vav Kei, this Vayipach comes into this world, L'slabish v'guf ha'adam, to reveal itself in the body of a person. And it's a very big chiddush, you would think, that Havaya should come into this world. Other creations are from Shem Elikim, and the Elikim conceals and conceals and conceals some more, so you understand that it comes into this world. And the Shama comes into this world, it's Havaya. First of all, B'chalal Vayipach. Second of all, Frat, the comparison between the Yud Kei Vav Kei by the Eibishter Be'elakus. Yud Havaya person is a shtickle kled. How can it be that in Elam Hazeh there should be a Gili of Shem Havaya? Says the Rebbe, the way it works is because it's Nimshacha, it's drawn, it comes from the inner dimension and the root of the Eibishter speech, which is the air of Hashem's mouth. True, all creations come from speech. True, Neshamas Yisrael come from speech as well. But in most creations, the Itil is the Chitanius Hadibur, and by Neshamas Yisrael, which come from Shem Havaya, it's the Pnimius and Mokoir Hadibur. Hamru is based Heitatakana, which comes from the latter Hey. Hashem blew into the nostrils of Adam the breath of life. And man became a living being. It says in Zayah and Tanya Perek Beis that one of blows from the innermost levels. So the point is that even though the way Neshama comes on into this world, it's also in this world like any other creation, it continues to be Havaya in general, and Havaya in particular, even in this world. Which is the Pshat and the Pasuk, which the Alter Rebbe quoted on side the Gimel and Beis at the bottom of the page. That Yidden are a portion of Shem Havaya. Yaakov, Cheva, Machalas, Yankov is a robe of the Eibishter's inheritance. The Alter Rebbe explains Pirush that even though the Neshama comes into this world, it's still attached to the Eibishter. For example, a rope. One end of the rope is attached on high. Another end is attached on low. Right? So even though the rope has two edges, the lower edge is still attached. Right? The same is true in a year. Even though the Neshama comes into this world, it continues to be Havaya because of the principle of Vayipach and so forth. Kihine, Pshata Kosa Mashkos Vayipach. The tie to the word that Hashem has blown, Lahayres Lanu comes to teach us. For example, if a person blows to some place, his whole essence reaches that place. Similarly, the Neshama comes into this world, so the Shem Havaya is blown into this world, even though it passes through Dibur. However, there's a however. What's the however? That the person blows, so they're blowing the whole essence. If nothing is blocking the whole essence, comes down. If something is davar chaytzit, something is obstructing or mafsek and interfering with time in the interim in the middle, ein hevel hanefeach. So the air which is being blown will not be elo magir, rise up and reach klal at all, eisei makam, to that place where it's supposed to reach. So on the one hand, we're saying Vayipach. Vayipach means Hashem blew the Neshama, that even when it comes into this world, it's Havaya b'klalo b'frat. But on the other hand, since the allegory, since the mashal is one of blowing, that means to say if there's an obstruction, it doesn't come into this world at all. Similarly, if there's an interruption and a separation from the body of a person and the wind of the Eibishter, so the Havaya doesn't come down into this world. Yid doesn't do Avedas, he's Chelek Havaya Amei, V'yipach Babav Nishmas Chaim, even when he comes into this world, and he comes back through the Maimon Nasa Adam, through speech, he continues to be Hevel. But if there's an obstacle, an obstruction, the air of the Eibush doesn't come into this world. The idea that a Yid is Havaya doesn't reach this world. To say it, I'll tell you right now what the Rebbe is going to say later in the Pedic. We all have a Etzam Neshama, a Chaya Yechida, and we have the parts of the Neshama which are in the Guf, the Nefesh, or the Nefesh and Ruach, or the Nefesh Ruach and Neshama. If there's no obstruction, the Havaya, which is in the Yechida, comes into the Nefesh Ruach and Neshama. If there is an obstruction, the Nefesh doesn't get from the Havaya, it's cut off. And then there's taka problem with the Chelek Havaya Amei. The Neshama in this world is not so much connected to Havaya, because the marshal of Vayipach means Hashem is blowing. The blowing aspect of the creation is not reaching us. The Fashteis, that's something he doesn't have. Ach be'emes, the truth has to be said. The truth of the matter is nothing obstructs by the Eibishter. And Eibishter fills heaven and earth. And Ani, by the way, goes on save of Kalam. Hashem glorifies the whole world, and Kveda goes on Mamala Kalam. Moreover, not only is the save of Kalam in here, and Mamala Kalam in here, but the Tzimtzum is like Yipshuatei, there's no place where Hashem is not. The heavens above the earth below, there's nothing besides for the Eibishter. Not only does the world have a Gilei of Mamala Kalam and a save of Kalam, but the Eid Sof, the the idea of Kuluk Megalach Shiva is here as well. The Imam Allah Kalam and Hashem fills up the worlds and Ivichuli and so forth. And therefore the Eibush is all over. So you cannot say that the Eibush blows and the blow doesn't reach us. Because there's an obstacle, there's no obstacle to God, but the Eibush, and the Teretz is, Elok Meshakoso B'Yishaya. It says in the Pasuk in Yishaya, that even though Behelim, godliness is not only revealed to a Yid in this world, godliness is revealed to the whole world. But it's in a hidden way. It's a hidden way because the world is Klippa. In a Yid, the Havaya is supposed to be revealed. And when a Yid doesn't Aveda, so it says in Yishaya, Kim Avenetzechem Hoyom Avdilim. Your Avedas, our Avedas stand as the barrier between you and your God, between us and the Eibush. Vatam, why does an Aveda become an obstacle between the Vayipach, between the Gila of Shem Avaya of the Neshama in this world? Since Avedas are against the wishes of the Eibush. Hamachaya Zakel gives life to everything. Because of it, it's written, Hashem creates in heaven with what he desires. Ukmation is Baya we discussed earlier, the Chayfetz and Ratzon. This was discussed on Daf Tzadik Daled on base. The will of Hashem is the source of the whole creation. It's the source of the whole Shem Havaya. And the real reason the whole creation exists is the Eibishter's will. And when we do against the Eibishter's wishes, so although Hashem is all over, but it becomes hidden. And Lagabayas, Hashem is obstructed and blocked. Right? So when things are the way they're supposed to be, Hashem blows, and Havaya is revealed. When we do Avedas, things which are not good, we make a wall between ourselves and Shem Havaya. Havaya cannot be revealed in this world, even though Tzimtzum is like Yipshute, but in terms of Gili, it's not here because we went against the will of Hashem. Says the Rebbe when you're not Kaddish. That explains what the Kaddish is. What does it mean? A person who doesn't Aveda, certain Avedas, is cut off from Hashem, and he lives only till 50, he lives only till 60. It means the cord of attachedness that comes from Shem Havaya of Atzilus to the Havaya, and the person was cut off and interrupted. It came down from the lower hay of the Eibush Canal, we discussed in the previous page. And when a Yid does an Aveda, there's a separation between the Neshama down here and the Neshama as it is up there. It says in the Pasuk, that the Neshama gets caught off from the Pnimius of Hashem. So says the Eibush, from before God. In other words, Kaddish doesn't kill the whole Neshama. Kaddish kills only the part of the Neshama that goes into the goof, because it's separated from the Pnimius of the Neshama, from the Nebel of the Neshama, which is connected to the Eibush. So what's the Alter Rebbe saying? When you don't do any Avedas, Havaya reveals itself from the goof. Okay? When you do an Aveda, you create a barrier between the Neshama down here and Havaya Lamaila, and therefore certain Avedas affect that the Neshama should die. The person should die before 50, or the person should die before 60, because they're cut off from Shem Havaya Baruch. If a person does an Aveda, She'ein Bem Kaddish, it doesn't have Kaddish, so the person could live many, many more years, even though they did cut themselves off and part from the Eibishter. But they'll go upon them at least, they damage just a little bit. Like a dent in a knife, an imperfection. To illustrate what it means that each Aveda creates an imperfection, think of this example. If you have Mechavel Av, a thick cord, that is woven together of 613 finer threads that are dakim, that are edala. Yeah? So when you do Kaddish, you cut the rope completely. So the Neshama Lamaila, the Chelek Havaya, doesn't die. The Yankiv Chevel Nachalasi can die. Where the Neshama is down here, that it's supposed to be linked to the Neshama Lamaila, this can get cut off. And when you do Avedas which are not Kaddish, Kocha, similarly, Chevel Amshacha, now the cord of attachedness, Kol Matayag Mitzvah includes all 613 mitzvahs. If a person violates one of the Avedas, which is not the aim from Kaddish, Nifsek Chevel Adag V'chol, he cuts a thinner rope, and if he doesn't have Aveda of Kaddish, he cuts the rope completely. So you must understand the first point that he says about Kaddish. Why is it Yid does Avedas is Kaddish and Misa B'dei Shemayim? You have to understand the special connection between Yid and Hashem to understand the possibility for Yid being cut off. The special connection is that the Havaya of the Neshama is not only in Atzilus, it's even in this world, and therefore it could be cut off through Avedas. But when it is cut off, it's only the Yankiv Chavan Achalase, the part of the Neshama which is in this kuf, which is cut off, and not the Chelek Havaya Amen. Look at however, even though a Yid does an Aveda of Kaddish, has cut himself off from the Eibush and no longer could live, the Gam B'chayev Kaddish or Misa, even a person did an Aveda which cuts himself off from the Eibush, of course it's Misa B'dei Shemayim. They don't die immediately, but Nishra die, and Be'harishimu, there remains in that person still a trace, an avshel kiss of the godly soul, by days, and as a result, Yossi could live till 50 or 60, but just not more. So a Yid's Neshama is different than all other creations, comes from Shem Havaya, and because of a Yipach, Havaya is revealed in this world, and Avedas create a barrier, and Kaddish creates a huge barrier, cuts it completely, but you can live till 50 and 60 because some is remaining. You understood? So what did we explain? We explained Chelek Havaya Ame means even where the Neshama is in this goof, and we also explained Kaddish. And Kaddish means we're disconnecting not the Neshama from the Eibishter. but the neshama shebeguf from the Shem Havaya L'mayla. Umasha Kasa b'Shem Arizal. When Arizal writes, that a person who's cut himself off from the Eibishter, who has no kadas, who's chayiv kadas and misad d'shemayim, cut himself from the Eibishter, he lives on because he has makif. Says Rebbe, Eini inyan l'chayi gashmis haguf. This is a different idea. This is not what we're speaking about. This is not connected to the gashmis haguf. Okay. And what we're talking about is either Almighty Adnun Shana, it only lasts till 50 years, or nowadays Kitul Akama, as we discussed in Pedig Vav. There's a concept in Kisvei Arizah where the person has kadas, there is a makif that comes in. The Rebbe writes a footnote on this, which I think it means to say that only the part of the neshama that goes into the guf can get cut off. But the Chai Yechida, the makif of the neshama, can never be cut off. In other words, kadas achatchil doesn't touch Chai Yechida. It only touches the part of the neshama which are in the guf. So Arizal says, because of this makif, the Chai Yechida is not cut off. You follow? So the Rebbe brings a footnote that says in L'Kutei Torah that a person could repair even kadas. He says, just like, for example, if you could imagine surgery where a person who had his brain cut off can have his head cut off, can have his head sewn back onto his body, and he should live. Similarly, the makif could repair even kadas misa b'dei. Tells them L'Kutei Torah. As in Gashmis, I suppose you cannot. Now, the Rebbe says L'Kutei Torah that a person could do tshuva even for kadas misa's besin, and it's the equivalent of misa b'dei shamayim. It's the equivalent of reattaching the cut off brain with the body. If you would be able to do that, you would live beyond 50. You live beyond 60 because the makif has healed the kadas and the misa b'dei.
What's the chiddush in that?
So wait, so the Alter Rebbe is saying, "Mashikosa b'shem Arizal nubei b'chinas hamakif ein in chayin shamas haguf," means we know that la'olam kadas only affects the lower levels of the neshama, not the higher levels of the neshama. Here he's saying that this makif could heal even the higher levels of the neshama's connection to the lower levels of the neshama. The day shu should be healed. So that's a very different inyan than what we're talking about. That's actually fixing kadas. What we're talking about is one of two possibilities. Number one, adnun shana. Adnun shana means that even if a person doesn't do tshuva, and the kadas goes into effect, the neshama which is in the guf is cut off, neshedesh neshama, you live till 50 or 60. What's the lashon hara? Because adayin be'yad reshima min nefesh alikis. There's a small trace nefesh alikis left. Or in Golos, we'll get the will explain later. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is saying here that there's three things that happen when you have an aved of kadas. Number one, three possibilities. Number one, the makifim of the neshama are not cut off, just the pnimium of the neshama. And from the makifim, you could even do a brain replacement, head replacement. Number two, if you don't do that, so the neshama of guf gets cut off, the makif remains, but it gets cut off only by 50 or 60 because a little bit of the chayas which remains in the guf keeps it going. Number three, that in times of galus, we'll see in a moment, we fall into klipa, and because we fall into klipa, we get chayas on klipa as well, and therefore we could live beyond 50 and beyond 60. There are three separate issues. The Arizal is one issue, Umayri Adnun Shan is a second issue, Oibezman Hazeh is a third issue. The Arizal's makif means that you could actually repair the chet of kadas. Adnun Shana means with kadas you live till 50, 60 years. Oibezman Hazeh, which means in times of galus that people live much longer than the 50 or 60 years allotted to kadas and misa because they're getting chayas from klipa.
Doesn't tshuva take care of everything? The Rambam says that a person can always do tshuva. Even if a person's cut from baker his whole life, he can still.
But can it heal for kadas and misa b'dei shumai? This is the kasha.
What do you mean can it heal?
That he shouldn't have kadas.
You can do tshuva. You can do tshuva, so he takes care of it. No, if it stands in the way of tshuva.
In Tanya Perikafei, the Alter Rebbe says, "Chutz mikizas mises." In other words, if it's true that you could do tshuva even for kadas and misa b'dei shumai, it's a very unusual concept of tshuva. Classic tshuva means for lesser avedas, not for kadas and misa b'dei shumai. Okay? Now, this is the end of the shiur of Shivasa B'Tamuz.